to order for purposes of continuation of public discussion surrounding Bill 32-33, which is an act to amend 79601 of Article 6, Chapter 79, Title 21, GCA, and to add a new Item 5 to subsection 1515, small I 2 B of Article 5, Chapter 1, Title 5, GCA relative to the demolition of the Manuel F. Guerrero Administration Building in Haggaña as a hotel occupancy tax bond project. And this bill was initially publicly heard, and from that public hearing that we had, there was consensus, and given the responses that we received, there was consensus to have an additional roundtable meetings to really discuss what is the best course of action to take with respect to the Manuel F. Guerrero building. We heard from members of Governor Guerrero's family, and we committed to them based on a commitment made a long time ago from the sponsors of the original bill that renamed the building, as well as Vice Speaker Ted Nelson, who promised that no matter what would happen to the building, the namesake will always be preserved. And so that's where we're at. And we've also received a very enlightening testimony from Vice Speaker B.J. Cruz and Senator Cristobal, which really causes us to be at this juncture where we're going to continue to hear from the Vice Speaker. I'd like to recognize him and thank him for being here, as well as my Vice Chairman of the committee, Senator Tom Atta. At the public hearing that we had, I've asked the Department of Public Works to come back and provide an amount with respect to what it would cost to provide for a barricade, and what it would cost if we were going to go forward with a study, and what would the scope of work for that study entail. And hopefully we could get that information. The bill, surprisingly and thankfully to my colleagues, the bill is on the agenda, but certainly it's not going to move forward without a committee report, and certainly a committee report will not be compiled unless we can get some consensus with respect to how to proceed. This is a community a discussion and a decision that needs to be made by members of our community. So I like to defer to the Vice Speaker, who will give us an update on some Freedom of Information Act that he's requested, and the responses from those agencies based on the first public hearing we had. Mr. Vice Speaker.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize that I wasn't here during the March 4th hearing, but when I heard the testimony that was given at that hearing, I immediately sent out some FOIA requests, and I want to thank the Director of Public Works, Mr. Glenn Leon Guerrero, and Mr. Eric Palacios from Guam Environmental Protection Agency for being as responsive as they were and as honest as they were. I'm sorry that Mr. Leon Guerrero is not here today, but I see Mr. Beneventi. And I think it's imperative, Mr. Chairman, that I enter into the record the responses that I got. I sent out a FOIA request to Mr. Leon Guerrero. In it, I wanted all documents, reports, assessments, and evaluations held by the Department of Public Works that were used in the formulation of Director Glenn Leon Guerrero's testimony on Bill 32-33 delivered on March the 4th. And I received a letter in response, and I'd like to read it into the record so that the public can hear it.
Okay.
It says, Hoffman Vice Speaker, as per your request, the following documents, reports, assessments are provided for your review. On February 26, I was instructed to attend a roundtable meeting on behalf of the Governor's Office. Email attachment number 1. On February 27th, I contacted via email Mr. Tom Camacho, partner and structural engineer for Duenas Camacho and Associates, DCA, to assist me in assessing the structural integrity of the Manuel F. Guerrero building. Email attachment number 2. On March 4th, at 7:17 a.m., I requested via email information from Mr. Camacho on the building. On March 4th at 12:01 p.m., Mr. Camacho's email regarding the condition of the building. And on March 4th at 12:06, Mr. Camacho's text message with myself regarding the cost to rebuild and to retrofit it. Text message attached. On March 4th at 1:49, text message from Mr. Camacho regarding costs for structural assessment and for full assessment, text message attached. As indicated in my testimony, I did not have a chance to provide written testimony, so I verbally prepared the above information. I'm not sure if I don't want this to seem like it's an oversight hearing, and I was going to have Mr. Beneventi read the memo, and if you'd rather that I do that, but I will just, since I'm going to provide it to the record, Mr. Chairman, I'll just read it.
Okay.
On March the 4th at 12:01, Mr. Thomas Camacho of DCA wrote to Mr. Leon Guerrero, and he writes, I have attached Chapter 66 of the Guam Building Code, which identifies that if repairs and renovations exceed 50% of the value of the building, all repairs, improvements, and additions will have to comply with current building code, International Building Code, IBC 2009 requirements. This applies to accessibility, ADA, architectural, mechanical, electrical, and structural. And it continues. Based on my brief, again, let me read that. Based on my brief visual inspection of the former DOA building wing, the following are my preliminary comments. 1, the buckled floor tiles on the ground floor level are not related to any structural issues with the concrete slabs on grade. The buckled tiles resulted from poor installation and adhesion of the floor tiles to the existing concrete slab. 2, no major structural deficiencies were noted on the exterior wall surfaces. I'll repeat that again for the public. No major structural deficiencies were noted in the exterior wall structures. 3, structural shear walls were part of the original structure and are limited to the perimeter of the building. However, some interior CMI partition walls were erected within the interior spaces, separating areas or creating rooms. Again, no structural distress was observed on the interior CMU walls. 4, the second floor level showed signs of patterned roof cracks between the building frames and the leaks throughout the entire length of the building. Concrete cracks and spalling was observed at the covered bridge walkway columns. It should be noted that the exterior roof surfaces were not, the buildings were not inspected. Right? I read that into the record, Mr. Chairman, because I still haven't figured out where Gita or whoever wrote the bill for the committee got the impression that the building was in structural disrepair. Because this is the second DPW site visit that shows that it's not structurally deficient. And I don't know, Mr. Chairman, but I'm not sure how often we provide testimony for committees using text messages as the basis for which we received it at 12:01 p.m. before a 2 o'clock hearing. And that's the basis for coming out and testifying that the cost of the repair for the building was going to run from $17 to $25 million. I want to also make clear that I wrote to the Environmental Protection Agency, and I asked for all documents, reports, and evaluations held by the Guam Environmental Protection Agency regarding the area presently referred to as the Manuel F. L. Guerrero building that indicates the presence of asbestos and other hazardous substances at that site. Number 2, I asked for the steps taken or documents issued to notify each of the employees who worked in the Guerrero building of possible exposure to asbestos and/or other hazardous materials determined to be present by EPA. And 3, the specific steps taken by EPA to mitigate employee exposure to such hazardous materials as described in number 1. I received a response back from, I'm not sure if it was for Mr. Palacios or if it was actually signed by him, but it has his signature line, and I'm not sure about the signature. It is Mr. Palacios's. He's just confirmed it. And in it, he writes, Hoffity, Mr. Speaker, this is dated March the 11th. The Guam Environmental Protection is in receipt of your Freedom of Information Act request dated March the 6th, 2015. Please consider this to be the agency's response to the same. Attached herewith. On question number 2, further actions have not been undertaken by the agency as it continues to conduct its diligent review of the information obtained following its site visit on February the 16th, 2015. I'll note that the bill was introduced on the 22nd of January, a full 28 days prior to that. All right? The agency has not undertaken steps to, quote, mitigate employee exposure to such hazardous materials at the Manuel F. Guerrero building, as is not currently and actively occupied by the government of Guam employees. And he very graciously attached a copy of that report. And I submit that to you, Mr. Chairman, as copies for your record, to show, one, that I don't know where the statement came in the bill that the building is structurally deficient. And 2, the issue of the asbestos. We've had employees, hundreds of employees in there for the last 60 years. And the 16th of February 2015 was the first time EPA, or at least in their FOIA response to me, is the first time EPA has gone in to inspect the building. Okay. My third question, I'm glad that Mr. Cameron is here. I didn't FOIA him, but I'd like to just get on the record because, Mr. Chairman, I want it completely understood. I am not opposed to the building of the Palazzo, right? With all due respect, sir, I wrote the Articles of Association for the Palace Restoration Association of Guam in 1977. I'm not even going to ask how old you were there because you're going to make me feel really, really old because I was legal counsel at the time when I wrote that. And so I just want it clear that I have been on this before anybody else was on this.
Or born.
Yes, or born. And so it's not that I'm opposed to the rebuilding of the Palazzo. I think they can coexist, you know, and that's all I'm trying to get, because in my testimony that I had Mr. Paris read for me on the 4th of March, I'm just appalled that we're thinking about destroying a building that has historical significance just so we can build a building where the Japanese Taitsu, the American admirals, and the Spanish governors colonized us and ruled over us, where Manuel Guerrero himself was a messenger in the building, but we're going to destroy the building that he was the governor in. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And when I've done some of this and discovered that the building is still structurally sound, at least from 2 different people by Public Works accounts, trying to figure out how much research was done. And maybe Mr. Cameron can respond to me. What are the dimensions of the palace? How long is it?
From which the current azotea is, because the azotea primarily functioned as the second floor outdoor patio to the then existing palace. It nearly touches the DOA building as it stretches over towards that area.
And I'm glad you said that, because I just wanted, Mr. Chairman, to show this. There is a book on the palace, and the azotea, as it currently sits, is the left-hand corner of the palace in the back. And it stretches across 145 feet. We measured it and remeasured it, and 3 of us went out on 3 different occasions to measure it. If you run 145 feet from the corner closest to the chocolate house, which of the azotea, 145 feet, you still have 20 feet from this point to the beginning of the old DOA building. The DOA building does not need to go down. And I really think that we have to stop and think about the economic benefit of that building. We're going right now, and we have I saw the IFB the other day out for the reconstruction, renovation of the old Guam Congress building. We'll have maybe 4, maybe 5 of the senators in that building. That still leaves 10 people out. That means we still have to house 10 senators somewhere. We're spending $30,000 a month in rental for 10 people outside of the building. If we take the DOA wing, we could put in 10 huge offices for 10 senators. If we take the gubernatorial floor on the executive wing, turn that into a full governor's museum of all the Chamorro governors, even the American governors, a steer for Governor Daniels on the second floor to show how it was brought up the stairs and how they had to crane it away from there because even animals can walk up the stairs, but they're not stupid enough to jump and walk back down it. So, there's so much history in that building. And then on the bottom floor, if we put a visitors bureau to address I know Mr. Cameron has had the Hagatnya historical walk from up at Government House all the way down. They could stop there for more things, for the historical and GVB assistance. We could have an expanded bathroom downstairs so that we no longer have the people going to the cathedral bathroom. If you build the palace and the governor moves back into it, we don't have to have the visitors going into the building to use the bathroom at the Palazzo, if that's going to be the governor's office. Or if it is turned into a Spanish museum, we would still have the people from Angel Santos Park and the people from the Plaza de España being able to go to a public bathroom that we can keep clean for them on the bottom floor behind the azotea. We could have a souvenir shop and a coffee shop. I ask us to please reconsider the intent of this bill to demolish the building. Use the economic value of this building to our benefit and for our children and their children. Preserve the history of Chamorro men who finally, after 400 years, were able to reestablish themselves as the Magalahi of this island. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Speaker. I want to recognize and thank Senator Torres for being here. Okay, I want to give Public Works an opportunity to address the comments made by the Vice Speaker. And in your comments, I just want to underscore that if we're going to appropriate money from the hot bonds to do this study, we want to make sure that it's in line with what's going to get us toward the goal of whether to demolish the building or whether to renovate it. That's what the study would entail. I don't want the people following on TV to say that we're going to be spending money on, again, another study that's not going to go anywhere. Because I think if the genesis of this bill evolves into the preservation of the Manuel Guerrero building, and taking into consideration what the Vice Speaker talked about, I think for peace of mind, that study will provide that kind of purpose. So I was just trying to generate some kind of consensus and common ground, because we need to do something. Even the Vice Speaker acknowledged that that building cannot continue to be an eyesore in the heart of in the seat of our government. And so I want to give DPW an opportunity. I want to also quickly recognize the EP Administrator, Eric Palacios. He's here, but he's disclosed to us that he has the flu and he doesn't want to contaminate us. So unless there's anything you want from him to respond, he will, but otherwise I'm happy with him sitting where he's at. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Felix Benavente, Deputy Director at Public Works. Acting Director at the present time. Our Director is in Chicago attending a conference. We'll be back Monday. I apologize for not submitting any written testimony. This was my plan over the weekend. However, we were visited by Tropical Storm Balvi, and we had to spend all of our time paying attention to that responsibility. In addition, today and yesterday we were doing damage assessment. So unfortunately, I had to be attending to those things. So I do have notes from my discussion with Director Leon Guerrero before he left. And the notes that I have, and it references the stab cost that we received from Engineer Camacho that the director requested in terms of how much is this going to cost versus that. So this is the basis of the information that I'll be presenting. So we did not do a study, we did not put a scope of work for a study, but we did get some quick stabs, as the director referenced it. And a retrofit of the administration building estimated at 70,000 square feet, of which 50,000 is estimated to be the space for the office and the bathrooms, and 20,000 is for the hallways and stairways, things like that. So just roughly a 70,000 square foot building. Retrofit costs go anywhere from $350 a square foot to $250 a square foot. So at $300 and $50 a square foot, it'll be about $25.5 million to retrofit the building at that amount, and $250 a square foot will run at $17,500,000. If we were to put up a new building, and the engineer's quick estimate was between $100 a square foot to $150 a square foot. At $100 a square foot, we're running at $7 million for a new building, and 150 square foot would be $10,500,000. So there's a difference in the low end of retrofit 17.5 versus new 7 million of $10 million, and a difference of $15 million if we were to retrofit $250 a square foot, which is 17 million versus 10 million five if it was to be a new building. And of course, the new building does not include the cost of demolition. So if you can make sense of what I just said, that's the numbers I have.
I could, but if the study shows that the building is structurally sound, then you won't have to spend all that money to retrofit it, right?
I guess it
because I appreciate the Vice Speaker pointing out that this representation was made by GIRA when they drafted the bill. I think it was important to introduce a bill to force us to come to the table. And finally, we have an opportunity to do that because, as you know, there's no more tenants at the Manuel Guerrero building. It was very hard to do something while DOE is still there and DOA was still there and all other parts of government operations were still there, and now the building is absolutely vacant. And so would doing study, in your opinion, help, or do you think it's just an unnecessary expenditure?
Well, studies are always better, Mr. Chairman, because these stab costs don't really reflect the extent of the cosmetics, which is a term used for just what is there in between the walls and outside the walls and the roofs and the floors. Studies would always help. I don't see any reason why a study shouldn't be made, but this gives us a general figure.
And how much would it cost to put up a barricade? And as Senator Ada pointed out before we start, putting up a barricade is something you would do anyway if you were going to do any kind of construction. So it's not, again, it's not a throwing away money or a waste of government resources provided from these bonds.
Yes.
Do you have an estimate?
Yes, I do. We have an assessment for a chain link fence, 8 foot high, 10 feet around the perimeter, is $73,125. And for a 8 foot wide, 8 foot high plywood, 32,000, 10 foot from outside the walls, with of course the gates.
And it would just be at the immediate perimeter. It wouldn't include, of course, the parking, because that's
That's correct.
being
Just
utilized
like I
at the
said,
moment.
10 feet outside the wall.
Yeah.
Doesn't go anywhere further than 10 feet. And of course, during typhoons, the plywood would have to be taken down.
Yeah.
It says right here in the note.
What would you prefer?
I would,
This is your own project. If this money came out of your own pocket, what would you prefer? Because cheaper is not always the best way to go, right?
well, that's the question. See, if the purpose of the fence was for security,
Yeah.
I guess chain link fence would be fine, but it's also to soften an eyesore. So a plywood would do that better than a chain link fence. And you can always use graphics to soften the wall. But yeah, that's it's cheaper, and it does out of sight, out of mind, as opposed to a chain link fence. You're still going to see it.
And I think it's important that you stress that last part you put about the graphics can soften it, because I was in Istanbul a year ago, and in all of the construction sites that they actually had on a huge, it wasn't so much cloth, like a huge canvas piece that was out in front of the building, what the building was going to be when it was done.
Oh,
And if we're concerned about FESPAC, we will have huge 8 by 16 pieces for which all kinds of different icons and paintings can be done by various artists to make it an absolutely beautiful spot, as opposed to being a chain link eyesore.
that's the extent of my presentation.
And how long would it? How long would the study take?
I don't know, Chairman. I honestly don't want to give you an estimate of time. I'd have to get back with you.
Senator, Vice Speaker, I don't know whether one of the things that you want to find out is whether the Department of Administration building is a prehistoric. So what we researched is that the administration building is not a national or Guam register. The Plaza de Hispana is both the national and Guam historic register.
SHPO's in your department, right?
Yes.
Is it correct that SHPO currently has an application in for the old court building? to be placed on the National Register? I've seen the application, so whether you've seen it or not, I know that it's there. I wouldn't ask the damn question if I didn't know the answer.
Maybe the court building, but like I said, we're, on that
I
Department of
understand, but
Administration.
the point I'm trying to get to is, do you know the year the old courthouse was built?
I cannot answer that right now. I really don't know.
I will tell you because I worked in it in 1972, okay, when the year that it was built. That was 12 years after this building. I saw the application for registering the old judiciary building, the one that sits on the corner of Route O'Brien and Route 4. It was because it was a district court. The U.S. District Court. And your SHPO and your department is more concerned about listing another U.S. department building and ignoring the historical importance of a building where Chamorros were governors.
So we have those cost estimates. Well, we're not even there yet. I think what we're trying to determine is how are we going to continue to move forward to get that building and restore it to its former glory. And so we have a cost estimate of, and I'm not sure if my colleagues would even support spending money for a study. It's something I would think about overnight and determine if we're going to, I think the bill as it is to demolish the DOE building is premature at this point. We all agree, particularly in light of what was raised at the first public hearing that we had. And I've always said that we're going to try to build credibility in what we're doing by way of study that we can commission. But the most immediate need is to secure the area. And that's important to have that barricade. And Gita did say that we could use the hot bond money to do that, provided we authorize it by law. Mr. Vice Speaker.
And I think, Mr. Chairman, I'm glad you put, we need to restore credibility to the effort that we're making. And please, don't ever use text messages as the basis for your stab replacement cost or your stab retrofitting cost. It's imperative that we do a study. I'm not demeaning the structural engineer that submitted this. It was the rush job that DPW had him emailing him at 7:07 the morning of the hearing and asking for answer at 12 and 1 and email responses. Can you give me a stab cost? I don't see how we can possibly live with that. Where did that number come from? I'd like to ask that person to put his license on the line for those statements. And he'll stand by it.
Oh, Senator, yes.
Can I just ask, you've come up with some estimates on the cost of barricades, and I think the concern here is that we need to secure that building. Well, the chain link fence, we may be looking at around 73,000 plywood, which I think would be preferable, but usually that, that's done when immediately we're going to be doing construction. But what about maybe a third option of actually just boarding up windows and the entrances to to the building itself, which might be less costly, and at least the building we can still see from the road the activity that's going on immediately outside the building. So I think that third option, that cost estimate would be important
Is your mic on? Because
Sorry.
no problem.
We discussed that a little bit, and it really doesn't deter people from using the hallways, for example, the connector hallway. It doesn't deter people from using the second floor if it was just the windows, and it still is an eyesite. I mean, it's an eyesore.
Have you also discussed how long it would take to do the RFP and procure for these services for the barricade and?
No, Senator. We didn't discuss it, but I can get that information real quick.
Okay.
DPW might not have time because of rebuilding Route 4.
Well, that's done by highway.
Okay, Mr. Cameron, given what you've heard so far this evening, I know you're not in a position to speak for the governor, but maybe give some direction with respect from the administration. Could you find out if the administration would be amenable to those two items, to do the study and the barricade? I know the governor's taken the position that it's demolish the building and he has plans for that, but certainly he recognizes the legislature and the people of Guam as partners in this process, and whatever decision needs to be made. Would you be able to give us some kind of feedback?
Sure, I will look into that. But more importantly, I understand where Vice Speaker Cruz is talking about the Palacio, because I remembered one of the first public events I went to when I first came back to Guam on November 16th of 1986 was to the Spanish Palace Restoration $500 a pop ball, which we did, my mom and I, and it was really elaborate. And we also saw the actual what do you call it? The displays and stuff like that. And as a matter of fact, that particular display sits in the Kaha Gallery today. Arazala, I believe, was the architect or engineer who was looking at that potential restoration work. And here we are, how many years later? We're very excited to hear, because the Hagåtña Restoration and Redevelopment Authority, in its quest, as you sit as well, representing the 15 senators, the 14 other senators, and it's really important that the Hagåtña Restoration and Redevelopment Authority endorses the Palacio restoration. We surely do. Also, the Hagåtña Restoration and Redevelopment Authority has also indicated a desire to have the Department of Administration in the properties that we're talking about as well. So we're looking at other offices in that properties. So those are part of our tandem leaps in reference to planning, and that's already being incorporated. It has been spoken often, but it's being incorporated on our master plan, which will still have to muster the approval of the Guam legislature, of course, prior to it being approved as a master plan per se.
Okay, so would you be able to get something to us in writing that reflects those amounts and also the scope of work that you like to see in the bill, so that Public Works knows exactly the parameters to which your agency would operate under?
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, you're asking for the cost of the study and the scope of work?
Yeah. To accompany so that it's clear that that's what we have an idea what we want to look for, the structure, that's the biggest thing that we have to resolve, right? Is whether or not that building is structurally sound, and there's conflicting reports that, and also the cost of the barricade, so we can make a decision.
Just as a correction, Mr. Chairman, there's no conflicting report. There are two reports.
But Gita
One
says,
by, well, I don't know where the engineer at
but
Gita
that's
is,
the conflict. Yeah.
but just don't say that it's conflicting reports. Two engineers, Mr. Camacho and the DPW engineer in 2012, said there was no structural damage. Whoever the author was of Bill 32 alleges there's structural deficiencies. There are none, according to the two engineers. The scrivener may have a problem, but not the engineers.
Okay. Okay, I also want to take the time to recognize Senator Cristobal and Mr. Santos from the Hagåtña Restoration and Redevelopment Authority. And as I call these two individuals up, you came a little late. We spent the last 40 minutes determining that the bill in its present form will not go forward, calling for the demolition of the Manuel F. Guerrero building, but more so talk about amending the bill to provide for a study, as well as provide for the monies necessary to construct a barricade around that building. I know you have some thoughts, Senator, regarding the disposition of that building, as so does the Vice Speaker, and Mr. Perez is also here. But that's not, we're not at that point right now. After we determine what the most critical steps are, we're going to have a series of these meetings so that we can, as a community, decide how to best go forward in the decision that needs to be made with respect to that
Yes.
building.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for allowing me again to testify. But I'm just wondering whether the bill addresses the process that the GovGuam has basically put in place on how to deal with these buildings, and so I'm concerned whether we're going to adhere or whether the legislature is now going to set precedents. And I understand that the property is under the legislature, and it's really truly unfortunate that the legislature has never gone to that path of allowing this property because it is in the Guam historic list of his inventory of historic places, and the normal correct procedure would be to let it go to the process. That's how MPS funds these projects, and I'm wondering whether that's...
You continue to point fingers at the legislature. We didn't prevent any process from going forward. So in the
it will. The bill will.
No, it wouldn't, because we're not demolishing the building at this point. And that's why I wanted to update you what we talked about, so we don't go back and rehash 40 minutes of a conversation, and to tell you that we're in agreement. And I think the bill could also require the Department of Parks and Recs to report back to the Speaker of the Legislature what the status is with respect to putting that building on the National Registry, where it went wrong over the years, and what we could do to make it right. I think I could be open to doing a provision in that, to really recognize the passion that you have to make sure that this government finds a way to put these buildings on the SHPOs here.
Yeah, because
I don't see them. Oh,
if
okay,
I may,
please come forward, Linda.
Oh, the SHPO is here. I'm concerned because of the EPA report that normally, when you do a survey of these buildings, the survey would, especially on historic buildings, the survey would be to look at mitigating rather than demolishing. So it seems like we're going backwards.
Okay. I think I can get your question answered. Ms. Uggan, is there still opportunity to get that Benoit F. Guerrero building on the National Registry?
Well, we have to talk about the significance of the building. Does it have value with respect to the culture, with respect to the history of Guam, with respect to the architecture of Guam, archaeology? That has to be further investigated. Yes,
you can start with using the Vice Speaker's 8-page testimony regarding the bill.
Oh, I haven't read it, sir.
Yeah.
Anything's possible.
But if we demolish it, then we've lost that opportunity because there's no more building.
True. An example is the Ngakta House. It was raised off the face of the earth, so we had to delist it. It was listed in the National Register.
But who gets SHPOs?
But it wasn't the government. that demolished that.
No,
It was
of
the
course
owner.
not, no.
But who gets
The bill-
SHPO to look at all these buildings, and who gets SHPO to initiate that process so we don't have to mandate it?
Well, let's look at the resources. At the time, it is in the inventory, the Guam Historic Properties inventory. 1979, it was listed in the inventory. Doesn't mean it was in the register. In that data sheet, the one who filled in the data indicated that it had low priority. It didn't have research value, meaning, is this something we really want to further research, and will it have the potential to give us more information with respect to history, architecture, archaeology, culture of Guam? No, it doesn't, because we already know it's in the the historic context is the Home Rule, the Organic Act. That's the historic context. Second American governance. So that's already the context, and there's a lot of within that context there are a lot of buildings and structures. With respect to the personally, my opinion, I think it should be demolished, and we should have the Plaza de España restored, the landscape restored. And it bothered me that the design of the building is based on a military barracks, and with no regard, when they came in and just after the bombardment, they started to plan for Aganya keep the seat of government, and they had no regard for what was there prior to the structure being built.
Okay, I appreciate your
Yeah.
input at this point.
Thank
This is
you.
your first time that you're at the committee for this issue. I did say that we weren't going to talk about whether or not the building should be demolished
Okay, I'm
tonight. No, it's okay, because we're going to invite you back, all of you. I hope we could generate some consensus, because I still have to amend this bill, do a committee report, present it to other members of the legislature. I want some support from us tonight that we do two things: that we call for the study, and DPW will develop the scope of work to determine the structural integrity and other issues that we have to resolve, as well as provide for a barricade. And so this bill will not talk about the demolition of the Manuel Guerrero building, and then we have to obviously come back as much as possible every other week, every month, until we determine whether or not both concepts can, because I know that Mr. Cameron will go back to the Hagåtña Restoration and Redevelopment Authority and bring to that authority the Vice Speaker's suggestion that maybe both plans can coexist. And so that there be we're going to approach this in many different directions with the ultimate goal of restoring that area to something that we can all be proud of as a community.
Yeah, I just have a question more from really a practical standpoint, and that is whether the building gets demolished or restored is really going to be determined by a vote of 8. And I just can't see spending money to do a structural evaluation on a building that could very possibly be knocked down, demolished the next day. So we would have lost the value of that structural evaluation. But if prior to embarking on that evaluation, we really need to determine what we want to do with the building.
Some have suggested that study is going to help them determine what we should do with the building. The cost to rehabilitate it, the cost to...
Mr. Chairman, what's really striking here is that we're now, a dilemma has arisen because there is a lack of support for by the very institution that should be supporting the preservation of historic structures. Many times I have testified during that process of nomination to the register, and attempt to preserve our heritage, our history, our culture for our kids to learn from. And the reason why we don't have that support, I'm guessing, and I don't think I'm too far-fetched, the reason why we're kind of hung up on how it appears and looking at all the structure and not looking at the more, the bigger value to me about that building is what happened, all the activities that occurred inside there. I'm not looking at, I'm looking at a mitigation approach by the very agency that should be concerned about preservation. I'm really just taken aback by my constant drive and you know, over the years, why do we have to fight for preservation? Why? And why is there so few for preservation? You know why? Because no one knows about it. No one knows about their history. No one values these things. That's why we're here. Otherwise, if we're all schooled and we have good knowledge about who we are and we have our identity intact, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be dragging meetings after meetings. It would be very clear to us today if we had learned and valued ourselves as Chamorros and our political development and what happened in that building. If we had value for that, we wouldn't be here discussing this. Honest. But here I am again, trying to preserve it for the memories that there are in there, for the voice, for what bounced on the walls of that building, the sacredness of things that happened there, and what it means to us as Chamorro people in our own modern political development. And it's all a part of this historic Hagåtña, because historic Hagåtña is not about just the Spanish part, it's also about post-World War II. That's why you're going to have numbers now. You know, in your committee, there's going to be how many of you? You know, and it's now down to that. It's really sad. Thank you.
Mr. Palacios, you asked to be recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to indicate that I guess whatever study will be commissioned, that it either incorporates therein or includes a study separate and apart relative to mitigation of the environmental hazards that we now know to exist at the facility. That's it.
May I also add that not only is it going to be an engineering architectural study, but it needs to also study the historical aspect below the building.
And also, your director wasn't aware of it, but am I correct in that your office is currently moving for the nomination of the old judiciary building to the registry?
The consultant is. We're assisting the consultant. They prepared the nomination packet. We're assisting them along the way to get a public meeting going.
And the year that was built?
62, 63, I believe.
72.
72. I don't know the 62 is in my mind because of the.
No, because 62 we was still over at the Janet building.
Okay.
And at the Guam Congress building.
72.
But 72. And I'm just saying, the Guerrero building was on the inventory in 1979.
Right,
The court building hadn't even lost its smell of a brand new building. And
the data said that when it turns 25 years old, that we would consider.
I understand, but the historical significance of what at that judiciary building?
It was the architectural feature, the significance of architecture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're caught in the architecture. We're upset about the fact that it was like a barracks. But as Senator Cristobal is talking about, we are looking at the historical significance of what happened in that building. And at the courthouse, you know, save for your father, I don't know what else would be historical at that building.
Sir, I understand you're saying we're caught in a dilemma, we can start process and nominate it. How do you want to treat this? Is it nominated as a significant architectural structure? Does it still have the integrity? You're going to have to do the halves, the hair. We can't proceed. It's up to actually the body, the public. The documentation is not an easy thing to do, especially when you're talking about writing the significance part. You're going to have to interview a lot of people and get, like we did the Congress building. That was a fantastic job that Joe Garrido did.
I think it'll be significant if the bill were amended to require that process be undertaken as part of this whole package of how we're going to proceed, right? So it's not just one side over the other. I think we have to take into account all the feedback, which have been very good so far. So what we'll work with you to develop some kind of language that you're comfortable with to require that process begin to put the Manuel F. Guerrero on the National Registry, right?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I also said at the last time you held, I hope this is a public hearing. Is this?
It is. Well, it's a continuation.
Okay. I said that I would research and find out whether National Park Service, whether funding from MPS would be jeopardized for other programs. If we're going to proceed on a building that has a lot of historicity, that now we need to flesh out and do all the research, and and I think we could. Would not following the process that the government of Guam has established to put these buildings into the register, not following that process, would the funding be jeopardized coming from MPS? And I think we need to find that out. Well, I would like to find out from the federal government, because they're the ones who are funding the projects. And I think the legislature, taking this route now, again, I really take exception to the fact that, of course, I know pointing fingers, you're sensitive about that, but the legislature has to take responsibility, really, Mr. Chairman, because you folks should have made the nomination, initiated the nomination when you knew there was HRA in place, when you knew things were happening in Hagåtña, and there was a lot of discussion about the capital city and what needs to be preserved. It should be a more holistic.
There was a lot of discussion about what to do with the capital city, and so the result was the governor's Palacio.
Well,
so there
are many other buildings here that we need to preserve, and it seemed to me that we should have taken note of that and proceeded with the nomination for that building.
Okay,
Thank
but
you.
I think what we're gonna do at least buys us the time that we need, so nothing is done in haste, right? And as Senator Ada pointed out, I'm very reluctant to spend money on a study, but I think if we can wrap our minds around how important this study is in order, to provide that credibility that this process needs. And it's going to help us in whatever we need to do. Study will come back and say the building is structurally sound. Then we can decide what to do from that point. The study may come back and tell us otherwise. Then we can decide what to do at that point. But if the bill also includes a requirement for SHPO to undertake the nomination process, I think we can be rest assured that all of the concerns brought forward since the introduction of this bill is being raised and being addressed, right? There was no, it was just a visual inspection and ocular inspection of the. Okay, so if you can, Public Works, if you can get us the, okay. Anything else? Yeah. This is one of those issues that it's very, nobody wants to talk about, but introducing this bill has brought us to where we're at today, and I continue to hope that we're all going to be part of this process, no matter how painful it may be, but we're going to get through this, right? So this roundtable is adjourned, and I think I have some direction as to how to proceed while we're in session. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.